President Trump declares executive privilege over the unredacted Mueller report. President Trump's tax returns from 3 decades ago spill out, and Democrats escalate impeachment talk. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Separation of powers fight. Separation of powers fight. I know, it's such exciting stuff when the President of the United States declares executive privilege in order to shield his Attorney General from possible impeachment. Wow! Things are getting so exciting for people who really love talking about the legal vagaries of executive privilege. We'll get to all that in just a second. First, for a few weeks now, I've been reminding you, Mother's Day is fast approaching. Did you listen? You did not. Now it's just days away. So what are you going to do? Well, I have an answer for you. 1-800-FLOWERS. It's here to help you pick out a gorgeous bouquet that will show your mother that she is loved, even though you have been remiss up till now. Right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses for just $29.99, 1-800-FLOWERS will give you another dozen, plus a vase, absolutely free. That's 40% off the original price. Okay, let me just tell you, 1-800-FLOWERS, it is a fantastic gift. It's so good. All of the flowers are beautifully presented. They last forever. I get my wife flowers every time I go out of town, which means I get my wife flowers a lot. 1-800-FLOWERS is the place that I go. This gorgeous bouquet of 2 dozen roses in a rainbow of colors is a perfect surprise she's guaranteed to love. Roses are the perfect way to surprise all the moms in your life, wife, sister, grandma. These breathtaking roses from 1-800-FLOWERS are picked at their peak. They're shipped overnight to ensure freshness. A dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, plus another dozen and a vase for free. It's an amazing offer, but you have to hurry because it does expire on Friday. Trust 1-800-FLOWERS to make mom feel loved. Order today from 1-800-FLOWERS.com. To order a dozen multicolored roses, plus an extra bouquet and a vase for just $29.99, go to 1-800-FLOWERS.com/Shapiro. That is 1-800-FLOWERS.com/Shapiro. This fantastic offer does end on Friday, so make sure that your mom is taken care of, and your wife, grandma, everybody. 1-800-FLOWERS.com/Shapiro. Okay, so the rubber now meets the road. The rubber now meets the road. The President of the United States this morning declared executive privilege over the unredacted Mueller report. So here is the report from the New York Times. They say, President Trump's asserted executive privilege on Wednesday in an effort to shield hidden portions of Robert Mueller's unredacted report and the evidence he collected from Congress. So, to recapitulate, William Barr wrote a 4-page synopsis of Robert Mueller's report. He then released the entire report with certain sections blacked out. The sections that were blacked out, there was not a lot of accusation that this hid super secret, really bad stuff that was going to end in President Trump's impeachment. It looked, just politically speaking, it looked as though Democrats were trying to shove into the redacted portions all of their expectations that were unfulfilled in the actual Mueller report. So they expected from the Mueller report damning evidence of obstruction of justice, damning evidence of collusion and conspiracy. And none of that was in the actual unredacted Mueller report. There was some bad behavior by the President of the United States. There was some ugly behavior by the President of the United States. There was nothing that rose to the level of criminally prosecutable behavior, even according to Mueller himself, who declined to say whether the president should or should not be prosecuted, kicked it over to Attorney General Barr, who said, I don't have the evidence to prosecute here. So Democrats, instead of saying, okay, well, Mueller didn't do anything, Barr didn't do anything, we're done here. Instead, Democrats said, you know what? Probably the material that we've seen does not merit impeachment, right? This is the implicit acknowledgement of the Democrats putting all of their expectations on the redacted sections of the report is that they are implicitly acknowledging that the unredacted sections of the report are not enough to sustain any sort of impeachment push. So instead what they did is they said, well, probably the redacted sections, that's the part that's nefarious. That's William Barr hiding material from us. From us! And William Barr was like, well, no, the reason that stuff is hidden is because it impacts ongoing investigations, number one. Or number two, to release it would violate the federal rules of criminal evidence because I cannot just release grand jury information into the public view. And also, we have no responsibility to turn over grand jury information to the legislative branch. If the legislative branch wants to do its own investigations, they can subpoena any witness they want and bring that witness to them, so long as the president doesn't assert executive privilege over that witness. Now, from the Democratic point of view, they're saying, okay, well, here's the deal. We want to talk to Robert Mueller. We want to talk to Don McGahn, the president's personal attorney. We want to ask them questions that we feel were unanswered in the Mueller report, and they should come and they should sit before us, and hopefully we can pry out of them some evidence that is impeachable because the report itself doesn't include that. And President Trump is saying, guys, we've just gone through a $35 million process here, resulting in a 450-page report. If it ain't there, it ain't there. And subjecting people who worked for me or people who are members of the executive branch to more of your questioning that will just generate more headlines, that will end in nothing. All of this is just Machiavellian manipulation. So this is where we end up with Constitution Fight 2019. Because the question is, What can the president assert executive privilege over? The Democrats have now subpoenaed the full Mueller report. They want all the unredacted sections. They even are asking for the grand jury testimony. And William Barr is saying, I can't hand that stuff to you because to do so would be a violation of my obligations under the law to protect people who have not been accused of or convicted of any crimes, who are not being tried for any crimes. It would be to subject them to scrutiny unwarranted by law, which is a proper position. And Democrats are saying, no, if you won't hand us that material, then we are going to hold you in contempt. And Barr says, fine, then I'll just ask the president of the United States to assert executive privilege, and then I don't have to turn it over, and you can't hold me in contempt because you have no cause to hold me in contempt because you can't legally get those documents. So that is where we stand. This morning, the Democrats pushing for some sort of contempt hearing on William Barr. They were going to push forward for that this morning. The president of the United States declared executive privilege over these documents. Now, this looks a lot like what happened with Attorney General Eric Holder in Fast and Furious. So there are a bunch of documents in Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious was a scandal that happened during the Obama administration. I know there were no scandals during the Obama administration. You've been told by the press. That, of course, is a lie. The Fast and Furious scandal was the DOJ working together with the ATF to allow guns to be bought by straw purchasers in the United States and then smuggled south to Mexican drug cartels where they would be used. And then presumably we would track where the guns went. And this would help us uncover the chain of weapons provision to the Mexican drug cartels. Some of those guns were then used in the killing of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. And this became a national scandal. So Congress investigated, and they investigated Holder, and they said, did you give the explicit go-ahead to the ATF to allow illegal sales of weaponry that you knew was going to be smuggled to Mexican drug cartels and that you could certainly foresee was going to be used in the murder of American citizens? Eric Holder then asked the president, then Barack Obama, to use executive privilege to shield him from the exposing of documents. Congress proceeded to hold Eric Holder in contempt. That executive privilege contention by the Obama administration ended up being overturned by a judge. Those documents eventually were turned over. And it turned out that the documents didn't really show anything supremely damaging beyond what they originally knew. So here's the problem. Executive privilege is really a vague category of law. It's really vague. There have not been a lot of judicial rulings on executive privilege. Executive privilege was only formally acknowledged by the Supreme Court of the United States in 1974. There's nothing in the Constitution that explicitly says executive privilege exists, but there's also nothing in the Constitution that says that the executive power has to bend before every subpoena of the legislative power. There is a balance of power and there is gridlock. So the idea of executive privilege does have long roots in English common law. It's not just an invention that's been made up in the last 50 years or so. So this is where we stand. And I will get into the analysis of whether executive privilege applies here, because there are a couple of different types. Again, information first, opinion always comes after. So the New York Times reports that Mr. Trump's first use of the secrecy powers as president, the executive privilege they're now calling secrecy powers, came as the House Judiciary Committee is expected to vote Wednesday morning to recommend that the House hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena for the same material. Now, as I've been saying for a while, I think that this is all a game for Democrats. I don't think that they actually care about the underlying material. I think they're looking for an excuse to blame William Barr and cast him as an obstructor when, in fact, there's no evidence that he's obstructing anything at this point. A Justice Department official, Stephen Boyd, wrote on Wednesday morning, "This is to advise you that the president has asserted executive privilege over the entirety of the subpoenaed materials. Barr released a redacted version of the special counsel's 448-page report voluntarily last month. Democrats say that is not good enough. They've accused the Attorney General of stonewalling a legitimate request for material they need to carry out an investigation into possible obstruction of justice and abuse of power by Mr. Trump." And Barr says, well, listen, you are the ones buying votive candles of Robert Mueller. He didn't recommend an indictment. I looked at his report. You looked at his report. If you want to impeach him, go for it. I'm not prosecuting him because the evidence does not sustain that. And that's where we stand. The House Judiciary Committee prepared to vote Wednesday morning to hold Barr in contempt, despite that threat issued late Tuesday night from the Justice Department. Committee Democrats did not take kindly to the department's threat. They said, in the coming days, I expect this Congress will have no choice but to confront the behavior of this lawless administration, says Jerry Nadler. Now, the Trump administration says, what the hell are you talking about? We let Mueller go through all of his paces here. We spent $35 million. He's a member of the executive branch. The president of the United States could have fired him at any time. And the fact that he did not and let the report go forward. The fact that Don McGahn did speak for hours on end to Robert Mueller, and that Mueller interviewed him. And Mueller, I promise you, is a better interviewer and a better lawyer than anybody who's on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight Committee. Why are you suggesting that Robert Mueller did an insufficient job, but Congress is going to do a wonderful job. And if you think Robert Mueller did an insufficient job, well, then subpoena the witnesses yourself. Don't do this routine where you use his underlying materials and then suggest that he was too foolish to understand the materials he had already compiled. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has released a statement. She says the American people see through Chairman Nadler's desperate ploy to distract from the president's historically successful agenda and our booming economy. Neither the White House nor Attorney General Barr will comply with Chairman Nadler's unlawful and reckless demands. The AG has been transparent and accommodating throughout this process, including by releasing the no collusion, no conspiracy, no obstruction Mueller report to the public and offering to testify before the committee. These attempts to work with the committee have been flatly rejected. They didn't like the results of the report, and now they want a redo. Faced with Chairman Nadler's blatant abuse of power and at the Attorney General's request, the president has no other option than to make a protective assertion of executive privilege. It is sad that Chairman Nadler is only interested in pandering to the press and pleasing his radical left constituency. The American people deserve a Congress that is focused on solving real problems like the crisis at the border, high prescription drug prices, our country's crumbling infrastructure, and so much more. There's a lot of truth to this. There is no evidence that the redacted material is going to be providing Nadler and Democrats what they want here. This seems like a manufactured controversy. It does seem like a manufactured controversy. Now, does the president actually have the power to assert executive privilege over all of this material? We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about something we can all agree on, saving cash. The reality is if you're not shopping around, you're probably not saving money. So what if there was a way for somebody to do the shopping around for you? Well, that's basically what Honey does. Honey is a free tool that you download to your computer's browser. And then while you shop online, Honey scans the internet for coupon codes and other discounts, then automatically applies the coupon with the biggest savings to your cart at checkout. Like magic, it just runs in the background of your computer. It works on over 20,000 sites, from Amazon to Nordstrom, J.Crew, Nike, Best Buy, Nordstrom, Target, Macy's, and more. Nordstrom twice, guys. It takes 0 effort to install, just 2 clicks, and you're ready to start saving anytime you shop online. There's really no reason not to use Honey. We use Honey in our home all the time because we buy stuff from Amazon. Basically, all of these sites I just mentioned, we use Honey on. It's free to use and install on your computer in just 2 clicks. Don't take it from me, take it from our listeners. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/Ben. That is joinhoney.com/Ben. Honey is the smart shopping assistant that saves you time and money. Again, it saves you time and money, and you're doing it like it's nothing, right? I mean, you're not spending money. It just runs in the background of the computer and checks out the prices and gets you savings on virtually and a huge number of purchases at least. Go check them out right now at joinhoney.com/Ben. That's joinhoney.com/Ben. Okay, so the DOJ's letter to Jerry Nadler is worth reading in full. It's not very long. This letter was written by Stephen Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General. Here's what he wrote. We are disappointed that you have rejected the DOJ's request to delay the vote of the Committee on the Judiciary on a contempt finding against the Attorney General this morning. By doing so, you have terminated our ongoing negotiations and abandoned the accommodation process with respect to your April 18, 2019 subpoena of confidential Department of Justice materials related to the investigation conducted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. As we have repeatedly explained, the Attorney General could not comply with your subpoena in its current form without violating the law, court rules, and court orders, and without threatening the independence of the Department of Justice's prosecutorial function. Despite this, we have attempted to engage with the committee in good faith in an effort to accommodate your stated interest in these materials. Unfortunately, rather than allowing negotiations to continue, you scheduled an unnecessary contempt vote, which you refused to postpone to allow additional time for compromise. All of this is true, by the way. Accordingly, this is to advise you that the President has asserted executive privilege over the entirety of the subpoenaed materials. As I indicated in my letter to you last night, this protective assertion of executive privilege ensures the President's ability to make a final decision whether to assert privilege following a full review of these materials. So it's effectively a prophylactic assertion of executive privilege. The President will declare executive privilege, and then they will analyze what can be released, and then they will release what they think they can. Regrettably, you have made this assertion necessary by your insistence upon scheduling a premature contempt vote. Stephen Boyd, Assistant Attorney General. And all of this seems right. Now, the problem for President Trump in all of this is that the president has made it look as though he actively wants to stop people from talking to Congress. So the president has said that he doesn't want Mueller to talk to Congress. And that is a problem. Again, because Barr's case is not that nobody should talk to Congress. Barr's case is, I came before Congress, I testified before Congress, I revealed as much of the material as I could legally speaking. And then you guys want me to release material that is not releasable, right? You guys want something from me that I cannot give to you. And that is a perfectly plausible case, a case in which I basically agree with William Barr. I haven't seen the unredacted materials, but I think that he would not commit perjury by going in front of Congress and then saying the unredacted materials are actually, the redacted materials are actually not necessary to redact. I don't think that he'd commit perjury on that score. The problem is the image here. So the image here is that President Trump is now asserting executive privilege. This is what the press wants to push. The press wants to push the image that the President of the United States is actually asserting executive privilege, not because Barr asked him to, in order to prevent Barr from violating the law and in order to prevent a contempt vote that is empty, meaningless, and politically motivated. The image that is being drawn by the press and by President Trump in many reports right now is that Trump just wants to stop Congress cold in its investigations. And that image is being painted by stories like this one. So yesterday, before the president asserted executive privilege, the president started tweeting out that he didn't want Robert Mueller to testify. Well, there's no reason Robert Mueller shouldn't testify before Congress. There's no legal reason that Robert Mueller can't testify before Congress. Now, I understand the president being irritated. I do. I'm irritated. I find all of this annoying. I don't think that Mueller is likely to give Democrats anything they want. I don't think that Mueller is going to go before Congress and say, secretly, I wanted to indict the president. But publicly, I just sort of decided to skip it because I don't think that Democrats are going to get that from Mueller. I understand the president being like, this is dragging on forever. This is just another sham by Democrats in order to prevent us from moving forward with my agenda. I have a lot of sympathy for the president's position on that. But it looks as though the president is trying to stop Mueller from talking publicly because he's afraid of what Mueller is going to say, not because he's irritated with Democrats. And this has been a consistent problem for President Trump. Now, he fired James Comey, the former FBI director, because he suggested that James Comey would not simply say he wasn't under investigation. And that annoyed him. But for the press, it was because he was afraid of what James Comey might find. Same thing here. He's irritated that Democrats are asking Mueller questions. He's like, guys, we spent $35 million. You had 40 lawyers on this thing. It produced a 450-page report. Why do you need to talk to Mueller now other than some ginned-up controversy that makes no sense? So screw it. Not going to do it. Right? That's what the president is thinking. The way the press is playing it is Mueller is going to testify to something deep and dark and perverse. And Trump is super afraid of that. Now, you can listen to this New York Times piece from yesterday. When President Trump declared that special counsel Robert Mueller should not testify before Congress, he contradicted Attorney General William Barr, who had already told lawmakers he had no objection to letting Mueller talk to them. That clash has raised the prospect of a major test of Justice Department independence on Barr's watch. Defying Mr. Trump would be awkward for Barr, in part because he has long subscribed to a sweeping theory of executive power under which Trump may rightfully override and control any discretionary decision by a subordinate executive branch official. Well, yes, this is called the unitary executive theory, and it happens to be the case. They say, while the Trump team has been pleased with Mr. Barr's handling of the Mueller investigation, disregarding Trump's desires risks angering a mercurial president who turned on once favored subordinates, including Mr. Barr's predecessor, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Mr. Barr, citing his age and lack of further aspirations, promised Congress during his confirmation hearing, I will not be bullied into doing anything I think is wrong by anybody, whether it be editorial boards or Congress or the president. I'm going to do what I think is right. So as I say, the press is playing this as though Barr wants Mueller to testify, and Trump doesn't want Mueller to testify because he's afraid of what Mueller will say. And that is followed up by this report that President Trump doesn't want Don McGahn to testify. So again, the president does have the ability to assert executive privilege with regard to internal communications with the White House counsel, obviously. With that said, McGahn already testified in front of Robert Mueller. Having McGahn go in front of Congress is not going to hurt the president. McGahn knows how to handle himself. He knows what his testimony will be. He doesn't want to be seen as either lying to Mueller. He has to repeat his testimony basically verbatim, right? Because either he lied to Mueller, in which case lying to the FBI is a crime, or he would be lying to Congress, in which case he'd be committing perjury if he did not match his testimony. Right? So his testimony has to match. Trump, again, is irritated that Congress is calling McGahn. He doesn't want to rehash all of this again. But the press is playing this as though Trump is afraid of McGahn spilling the beans on him. So CNN reported yesterday, the White House has instructed former White House counsel Don McGahn not to comply with a subpoena for documents from the House Judiciary Committee Jerry Nadler, teeing up the latest in a series of escalating oversight showdowns between the Trump administration and congressional Democrats. McGahn's decision not to comply with the subpoena could push Nadler to hold McGahn in contempt of Congress, just as he is currently doing with Attorney General William Barr. Nadler issued a subpoena to McGahn for documents and testimony related to the committee's obstruction of justice investigation, setting a Tuesday deadline for McGahn to turn over the documents and proposing a May 21st hearing date. Nadler threatened McGahn again with being held in contempt if he failed to appear in a letter sent Tuesday night. He said, I fully expect that the committee will hold Mr. McGahn in contempt if he fails to appear before the committee unless the White House secures a court order directing otherwise. He said, a letter from the White House in service of the president's apparent goal of blocking or delaying testimony that the president believes would be politically damaging is not a basis for McGahn to violate his legal obligation to appear before the committee. The White House said it would not allow McGahn to turn over the documents. The White House has not relayed its position on whether it would seek to block McGahn's testimony too. So, again, there's two plausible reasons that Trump doesn't want McGahn to testify or turn over the documents. One is, I'm done with this. This is a waste of time. Mueller looked at all of this crap. What are you people doing? Not going to do it. McGahn, sit down, shut up. That's possible reason number one. Possible reason number two, and this is the one the Democrats are relying on, is Trump doesn't want Mueller to talk. Trump doesn't want McGahn to talk. Trump doesn't want Barr to talk. He doesn't want any of them to talk or turn over the documents because there's something hidden. Now, the reason I think theory one is more plausible than theory two, the reason why I think that Trump doesn't want these people to testify or turn over documents is because we've already had a Mueller investigation. That Mueller investigation resulted in a 450-page comprehensive report with minimal redactions. If there were no report at this point, I would say, yeah, it looks more like a cover-up than it looks like the president being frustrated with rehashing the past. But the report's public. We've all read the report. Mueller wrote it. Barr released it. Don McGahn testified to Mueller. So this is just a rehash. I think that this is the president once again acting frustrated. Why? Because this is always how he has been. He has always acted frustrated with the investigation because he feels he is innocent. Democrats are playing that frustration as the president trying to engage in a cover-up. So they say the reason he's asserting executive privilege is not because he's irritated or he's within his rights. The reason that he is doing all of that is because he's trying to cover up evidence of a nefarious crime, just like Richard Nixon. The difference is that Richard Nixon actually engaged in an underlying crime. There's no evidence that Trump engaged in underlying criminally prosecutable behavior. And number two, Richard Nixon tried to obstruct the equivalent of the Mueller investigation itself. He fired the special prosecutor, Archibald Cox. He fired his own attorney general in order to do so. That would have been the equivalent of Trump firing Mueller and firing the AG in the middle of the investigation. Trump didn't do either of those things. So the attempt to link Trump asserting executive privilege to Nixon asserting executive privilege, as some have been trying to do today, I do not think that comparison holds. It looks much more like President Obama asserting executive privilege on Eric Holder, maybe. And even then, I think it's more plausible that Obama was trying to hide documents to protect Eric Holder than that Trump is trying to hide documents to protect William Barr. In a second, we'll talk about how effective this assertion of executive privilege is likely to be. First, let's talk about a quick fact. You want to look like $1 million? You want to look awesome? You want to look like James Bond? You can't just get a generic off-the-rack suit. You need to get a made-to-measure suit. Indochino is the world's most exciting made-to-measure menswear company. They make suits and shirts to your exact measurements for an unparalleled fit and comfort. If you're in the middle of planning a wedding, they have tons of options for those looking to outfit their wedding party. I love the wide selection of high-quality fabrics and colors to choose from, not to mention the option to personalize the details, including your lapel, lining, pockets, buttons, writing your own monogram. Here's how it works. It's just awesome. I've done it myself. You can visit a stylist at one of their showrooms. Indochino has over 40 showrooms in North America alone. They will take your measurements personally, or you can measure at home and shop online at Indochino.com. Choose your fabric, design, customizations. Simply submit your measurements with your choices online. Relax while your suit gets professionally tailored and mailed to you in a couple of weeks. This week, my listeners can get any premium Indochino suit for just $379 at Indochino.com when you enter Shapiro at checkout. That is 50% off the regular price for a made-to-measure premium suit. Plus, shipping is free. That's Indochino.com, promo code Shapiro, for any premium suit for just $379 and free shipping. It's an incredible deal for a premium made-to-measure suit. Once you go custom, you don't go back. You're going to love your premium made-to-measure suit from Indochino.com. Go check them out at Indochino.com and use promo code Shapiro to get any premium suit for just $379 plus free shipping. Pretty awesome deal. Okay, so is the President of the United States likely to succeed in his assertion of executive privilege? Well, here's some of the background on executive privilege. This comes from the Brennan Center, which is a more left-leaning legal center doing legal analysis. Aziz Hook, who's a columnist, I guess, over there for them, a lawyer for them. He wrote this going back to 2007. So this was not designed for President Trump or against President Trump. And here's what it says. The president's constitutionally based privileges subsume privileges for records that reflect, 1, military, diplomatic, or national security secrets. This would be the state secrets privilege. So the president is negotiating with China. Congress subpoenas those records. Trump says no. Okay, 2, communications of the president or his advisors, the presidential communications privilege. 3, legal advice or legal work. That'd be attorney-client or attorney-work product privileges. So presumably he asked Don McGahn for legal advice. That is not subject to congressional oversight. And finally, the deliberative processes of the president or his advisors. The two most commonly invoked executive privileges are the so-called presidential communications privilege and the deliberative processes privilege. The presidential communications privilege protects from disclosure any communications that are either by the president directly or by his immediate advisors in the office of the president to the president. The Supreme Court did recognize this privilege in Nixon versus United States and Nixon versus Administrator of General Services. The Nixon cases were about Nixon being subpoenaed by Congress for records of his internal deliberations over Watergate, basically, including the Watergate tapes, including the Oval Office tapes, and the Supreme Court ruling that he had to turn them over. The court grounded the privilege in the need for candor in executive branch decision-making and the supremacy of each branch within its own assigned area of constitutional duties. In the Nixon cases, the Supreme Court applied the term presidential communication privilege solely to communications involving the president. So the president is talking with somebody and he wants to keep that communication secret. That falls under executive privilege. However, the D.C. Circuit cautioned that not every communication with a presidential advisor would be protected. The privilege should apply only to communications authored or solicited and received by those members of an immediate White House advisor's staff who have broad and significant responsibilities. So in other words, the janitor at the White House doesn't have executive privilege. Once properly asserted by a qualified person, the presidential communications privilege applies to documents in their entirety. It covers final and post-decisional materials as well as pre-deliberative ones. Critically, it covers any factual matter contained in a communication, and in this regard sweeps broader than the deliberative process privilege, which we will get to in just a second. But the presidential communications privilege can be overcome by a sufficient showing of need. So if this goes to court, expect that Congress will simply assert that they have a sufficient need because they're involved in a criminal investigation and they need to see these documents. One of the first judicial recognitions of an executive branch secrecy claim was written by Chief Justice John Marshall. He endorsed the idea that the privilege is defeasible. In other words, however well established the privilege may be, it has never been absolute. The Supreme Court has strongly suggested that the presidential communications privilege must yield whenever a coordinate branch's constitutional role is at stake. The Nixon case, concluded that President Nixon had to yield to a subpoena to preserve the function of the courts under Article 3. Another Nixon case held that Congress could roll back a former president's privilege in light of the scope of Congress's broad investigative powers. So Congress, says this particular piece from the Brennan Center, ought to be able to overcome the presidential communications privilege in any instance that it exercises its constitutional powers to legislate and conduct oversight. So the question will be, is this legitimate oversight that Congress is attempting to engage in, or is this basically political posturing? And that will end up in court. Then there is a broader and more powerful deliberative process privilege. The deliberate process privilege, according to the courts, is distinct and different from the presidential communications privilege. It protects executive branch officers' communications that are pre-decisional and a direct part of the deliberative process. A document is pre-decisional if it was generated before the adoption of a policy and reflects the give and take of the consultative process. In other words, President Trump is having a conversation with Don McGahn about what to do about the Mueller report, and it's before a decision has been made. So this seems to fall squarely within that privilege. The privilege has long been recognized by the Supreme Court. The underlying rationale is that the disclosure of deliberative communications will chill future communications, like Trump will never talk with his lawyer ever again, thus diminishing the effectiveness of executive decision-making and injuring the public interest. Now, properly invoked, the deliberative process privilege is narrower than the presidential communications privilege, primarily because the deliberative process privilege does not extend to purely factual material, unless it is inextricably intertwined with policymaking processes. In other words, if there is an investigation and it covers factual material, that's not a deliberative process privilege. Deliberative process is McGahn offering his opinion on the underlying materials. It doesn't necessarily cover the underlying materials themselves. It's also susceptible to congressional or judicial negation. The privilege disappears when there is any reason to believe government misconduct occurred. So, will this assertion of executive privilege hold up in court if the president tries to assert executive privilege over all of this? Only if the court, having looked at the actual privileged material, which it will, only if the court, having looked at the material, finds that Don McGahn was involved in legal discussions protected by privilege, or looking at the unredacted Mueller report, finds that William Barr is speaking the truth and that this material could not simply be released into the public. In reality, this is more of a delaying tactic than it is a legal tactic designed to keep these documents secret. In reality, I think the courts would be likely to rule against the Trump administration on executive privilege grounds, as they did, by the way, when it came to executive privilege for Eric Holder and President Obama. Now, here's the truth. There's a long history of presidents using executive privilege. That in and of itself is not impeachable. Now, Democrats have been trying to claim that the president, because he is asserting executive privilege, is indubitably trying to hide something. As I said, there's a very plausible alternative theory where he is just frustrated and annoyed, and where Don McGahn doesn't want to commit perjury by accidentally misanswering a question, or where William Barr is trying to prevent himself from committing some sort of federal crime by violating the federal rules of criminal evidence. So that's a plausible theory. A court will end up sorting this out. Suffice it to say that the assertion of executive privilege alone, in this particular case, does not necessarily mean an Nixonian cover-up. We'll get to more of this in just a second. I'll talk about the differences between various types of exertions of executive privilege, historically speaking. First, every night I try to fall asleep. There are days when anxiety and stress keep me awake. No matter what I take, what I do, it doesn't help. I'm not great at sleeping. But I've now been trying Calming Comfort by Sharper Image. It's a luxurious weighted blanket. It helps you relax so you can fall asleep and stay asleep naturally. And I'm a tosser and a turner. Calming Comfort blankets help prevent all of this. They're designed with high-density comfort fill to provide exactly the right amount of weight to help relax your body. It mimics the soothing feeling of being hugged for less stress and a restful night's sleep. Made with super soft velveteen material designed to promote a sense of calmness and relaxation for a more restful sleep. It's a weighted blanket that, I mean, let me tell you, it does feel as though you are being basically calmed into sleep. It's really well named. Wake up feeling refreshed. When under the blanket, you experience the great feeling of being hugged. Calming Comfort applies an even amount of pressure over your body to help the production of serotonin and melatonin, simulating deep touch pressure stimulation. Calming Comfort, it's 100% machine washable and dryer safe. The Calming Comfort weighted blanket comes with a 90-day anxiety-free, stress-free, best night's sleep of your life guarantee from Sharper Image. So what do you have to lose? Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to calmingcomfortblanket.com. Use promo code BEN at checkout to receive 15% off the displayed price. Again, that is calmingcomfortblanket.com, promo code BEN. Because you can't put a price on a great night's sleep, go online now at calmingcomfortblanket.com and use promo code BEN for that special discount today. It really is not only supremely comfortable, it does help you sleep better. Go check it out right now, Calming Comfort Blanket. And again, they've got that. It's going to be awesome, or you get to return it guaranteed. So what do you have to lose? calmingcomfortblanket.com. Use that promo code BEN for the special discount today. Okay, more on executive privilege and where this is going. Plus, a supposedly blockbuster report on President Trump not being good at business. Ooh, got him. That's where they're moving now. We'll get to that in just a second. First, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. When you do, you get the rest of this show live. You get the 2 additional hours of us every afternoon. I mean, we are working our fingers to the bone for you. You need to help us out. By the way, helping us out, becoming a subscriber, it's one of the things that also prevents tech companies from cracking down on us if they disagree with our basic politics. It also prevents all sorts of manipulative actions by our political enemies. Subscribing is the best way to support us. I get letters all the time. How do we support the show? Best way to do it, go over to dailywire.com and subscribe for $9.99 a month. For $99 a year, you get this, the greatest in all beverage vessels. Look at this thing, the Leftist Tears Hot or Cold Tumbler. Magnificent. Magnificent. Go check that out right now. Also, please subscribe at YouTube or iTunes. We have so many great Sunday specials coming up for you. Let me tell you, I mean, I'm eager to tell you the guest list. It's great. You're going to have to go check that out at YouTube or iTunes, and then subscribe if you want to get those a day early on Saturday and see our special material behind the paywall with all of those guests. Pretty awesome stuff. Go check us out. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast and radio show in the nation.